Eric Bischoff is currently on the line to answer your questions about Clash of the Champions 29 and much more. You listen to them, now hang out with us and Eric. This is After 83 Weeks with Christy Olson. That's me.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, the buzz begins.
Boom! There it is! Hello, 83 Weeks fans! Welcome to the show that is just for you. This is where we cover the myths debunked, all the juicy scoop delivered, and we have Eric on the line to answer all of your questions. So stay tuned. My name is Christy Olson, and you know Eric's digital producer, Steve Kaufmann.
Why, hello. We're keeping the man waiting. He is with us here now.
We are. George will be joining us in just a moment, and Steve stepped on my big intro
I'm
there.
sorry.
But also joining us, author, entrepreneur, former president of WCW, and the host of 83 Weeks, Eric Bischoff. Hello, Eric.
How are you? You forgot the king of... You forgot the king of... Wow, did I hear... Am I hearing
That's
sound
right. Our
effects?
studio audience is amped for you tonight, Eric. They are ready.
Wow. Now I'm really feeling good. Good to be here.
Good. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us. It looks like you're still in Stamford.
We are still in Stamford. Actually, you can see the boxes in the background. I got them kind of blurred out. Hold on. Let me work on my gimmick here. Oh. I was going to unblur my background, but yeah, we're actually packing up and we are leaving Stamford early, like at the ass crack of dawn on Saturday morning, and heading down to Florida for a month and a half or so. Going to enjoy some nice warm weather with the kids, and then mosey our way back to Wyoming.
All right. Well, you must be looking forward to that.
You know, I'm not going to lie. I've enjoyed it here in Stamford. My wife and I, Mrs. B, a.k.a. Lori, you know, we got here and we thought, you know what? It's not the same as living on, 20 acres out in Wyoming and looking up at the mountains, but there's all these great restaurants close by and there's so much convenience and everything is like, 2 minutes away. We got kind of used to that. But now that the cold weather's setting in and it's getting kind of ugly and gray and dark, it's kind of like, okay, it's time to get the fuck out of here.
Well, we could certainly understand that, and we are happy you've given us a little bit of your time tonight. The chat roll's already weighing in. John Garrison said, I can't believe that I can actually say hi to Eric Bischoff. That's pretty cool. He was epic when he had his part in the NWO, so they are ready and willing to shoot some questions your way. But I think... Hello and welcome, George Hermoza,
How's everyone?
our tardy host. I believe that he has a little game that he wants to play with you, Eric, tonight. Are you willing to warm up with a little game?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. So we are going to play a little round of Taboo with Eric Bischoff. We're going to give him some clues. There are words that we can't say in these clues, and we will see if we can get him to name a certain wrestler. So, since George got this whole thing kicked off, and because he was late, and I cannot shame him enough for that, we are going to get him starting us off here.
So we're going to have 1 minute. Pretty much we got to name as much made wrestlers as we can in 1 minute. We all got sheets of paper those are certain words that we can't say. So if any one of us says a word that we're not allowed to say, feel free to chime in and say, hey, you can't use that because you just lost the point.
Yes, shame them. That's what I do.
Absolutely. So whenever anybody's ready, we want to get that minute started. I'm going to give you 10 wrestlers. Hopefully you can name them all without me saying some common words.
All right, so this is Steve versus George. Who can get Eric to guess the most correct answers in 1 minute? I'm going to just throw my timer up right now.
Got a timer up.
Okay, he's ready. All right, cool. Let's hit go, George.
First wrestler, man called
Sting.
Sting. Luchador, the best one.
Rey Mysterio Jr.
There we go. Bald, tattoo.
Bill Goldberg.
There you go.
He's
Bald,
good at this.
also bald. Not in your company, but he was in another company. Bald.
Steve Austin.
There you go. He was a horseman. He was probably one of the best technicians. Probably, maybe one of your favorite wrestlers to watch.
Paul Roma.
He was a horseman. One of the later horsemen's. He
Trained a bunch of guys.
feuded with Chris Jericho. Dad was Joe. No, Dad was Boris.
Dean Malenko.
There you go. This guy was another best friends with Ric Flair.
Arn Anderson.
Okay. AEW champion. Heavyweight champion.
4, 3,
AEW.
2,
What's
1.
Ayatollah Rock and Rolla.
All right, a pretty good showing
1,
there.
2, 3,
Eric
4,
guessed
5,
6
6.
of
All right.
those correctly. And now, let's put another minute on the clock. It is time for Steve to challenge George right now.
3,
Go.
2, 1.
Superman villain. Superman villain appeared on the very first Nitro from the WWF.
Oh, you said it. You can't say WWF.
Well, then I
Wait,
lost
go to
that.
the next one.
Well, then I
right,
lost that
moving
point.
on.
He has a sitcom on Netflix currently, or they're shooting it currently. It'll be out by WrestleMania. Very large gentleman,
Paul White. Giant.
giant.
Got it.
His son, you probably saw him at Starcast, also has a mullet. Works.
Brian
I want
Pillman
to.
Jr..
There we go. This one's rough. I'm just gonna pass this next person. He was in The Wrestler.
No, you said it.
God, I need to pay more attention to the
Steve
thing.
is terrible at this game. Next.
He was recently departed this week.
Eddie Guerrero.
There we. Very.
I thought I just heard a bell.
Yeah, because I finally got one right. I'm bad at this game.
5 seconds.
You both live together. Both live close to each other in Atlanta. He does yoga
Diamond
now.
Dallas Page.
There we
Yes.
go.
A last minute.
It was a last minute one. I did not do well.
It was, however,
I mean,
bringing in
Hey,
our final score.
I just want to point out that if it wasn't for Steve, we wouldn't all be together. Steve worked really hard to bring me into this, little
So before we
quartet.
crap on his taboo skills too
this
hard.
quartet. And Steve's great at a lot of things. He's helped make our YouTube channel really successful. But Steve, you kind of suck at this game.
I was not my best. I will say that.
Agreed. George, the big winner on that one with
Undefeated.
6 correct. That was fun, Eric. Thanks for playing along with us.
I
And-
like games. I like to have fun.
Right? Well, I think you'll have a little fun with our chat roll too, who already has the questions rolling. New Punk Rant said, "How do I ask questions? Just type it, honey. You're already doing it. It's all good." Michael Pierce wants to know, Eric, did you have any remaining ambitions in wrestling, or do you feel like you've done it all?
I feel like I've done a lot, but I'm not sure I've done enough quite yet. So I'm keeping the door open. Never say never. I hate to keep saying that over and over and over again, but it's true in this industry. It's it's the entertainment business, whether it's music, film, television, wrestling, whatever. There's always new opportunities that present themselves, and if one presents itself that sounds like a great time and is a challenge and something I haven't already done, absolutely happy to. I love the business.
He's down for it.
Ank G in the chat actually has a really random one I want your thoughts on now. What are your thoughts on Kane's unmasking back in the WWE in 2001?
Going way back.
If you don't have any, that's an answer.
That's a good answer. I don't have it.
Okay.
No thoughts on that
Ank
one.
G had questions.
George?
Well, I do have kind of something going on to this episode, the Clash of the Champions, just because you mentioned there was a lot of talk with Hulk Hogan and his creative control. I'm kind of curious how exactly that worked. Was that Hogan kind of pitching ideas to you guys and you kind of going along with it? Or was that more so creative coming up with ideas and Hogan having pretty much the final approval on that?
So much. That's a really great question. I'm glad you asked it, because so much has been made about Hulk Hogan's creative control, and it's really been overblown. I'm going to tell you something right now, and this is not a criticism or anything. It's not anything I haven't said before. But if anybody doesn't think that top talent in WWE or anywhere else, including AEW, doesn't have creative control, they're kidding themselves. When they do. Now, Hulk Hogan, his was, in writing. So perhaps that, brought it to a different kind of a level. Whereas in a lot of other cases, it may not be in writing, but it's certainly no less of an issue. But with Hulk, it wasn't like he was pitching ideas to us or we were going to him and pitching a bunch of ideas. It was a very natural kind of evolution of storytelling and idea iteration, if you will. And we would go to Hulk and say, look, here's an idea. This is kind of what we're thinking about. And he more often than not, I would say probably 75 or 80% of the time, it was like, okay, well, that's cool, but what if we did it like this? Or what if we did it like that? There was never, it wasn't like he was sitting on a throne, with a gavel in his hand and going, I hate that idea. Go back to the drawing boards, goddamn it. It was never like that. It was just Hulk's creative control clause in his agreement was really there to protect himself against what he was afraid was going to be a lot of political kind of infighting and booking in WCW. Historically, WCW was a it was a snake pit creatively and politically. And there were a lot of people there that weren't necessarily out for WCW as much as they were out for themselves. Historically, that was the case. If you go back and look at the history of WCW and the booking in WCW and the politics in WCW prior to Hulk Hogan, it shouldn't be much of a mystery to anybody that's got a little bit of an open mind. Hulk just wanted some kind of language in his agreement that gave him the ability, if he sensed that there was some undermining going on or things were getting too political, that he could pump the brakes and kind of make sure that he wasn't being compromised. But in terms of it being like a big issue, I've said this, once or twice before, and it's worth saying again. The only time that Hulk Hogan ever exercised, in my opinion, and I was the one that dealt with him more than anybody, any real resistance to creative was at Starrcade 98 with Sting, when we had one plan and that afternoon he changed his mind and said, I'm just not feeling it. I don't think it's the right time. And we went in a different direction. Other than that, Hulk's creative control clause was never any more of an issue than anybody else's creative control or influence or desire to be heard, including Ric Flair and a lot of other people.
I do think Hogan gets a lot of flack in the years because people look at that at creative control like, oh, that's just him trying to, protect himself. But a lot of people do that. There's nothing wrong with protecting your brand. Like you hear a lot of celebrities doing, and at this time, Hogan was the biggest star in pro wrestling. Like there's nothing wrong with protecting your brand.
Steve Austin did it. Steve Austin protected his brand and got up and walked out and left WWE holding onto their nutsack. It's figuratively, not literally, but maybe literally. I wasn't there. I've been told, whatever. I mean, there's been a lot of top talent, and I'm not going to name names, and I'm not going to, get myself in trouble here, but I can tell you, there's a lot of top talent that have a lot of creative control to this day. So anybody that, I know it was, especially, you guys read my Twitter page, where I'm going here. There's a whole lot of people that have, jumped on the narrative of Hulk Hogan's creative control and Hulk Hogan did this and Hulk Hogan kept this guy down and Hulk Hogan. It's so much, it's been exaggerated and overblown and distorted so much over the years that people think it was this really, really big deal. And I'm here to tell you, it really, really wasn't. In many cases, Hulk was a lot easier to deal with creatively because he had confidence in himself and he had confidence in the fact that if he heard something he really hated, he could just, try to help make it better or nix it. But the only time that ever really happened was at Starrcade 98.
Well, another guy who made a very short stint at WCW around this time was Triple H. And you didn't say a whole lot about him on this episode of the podcast, besides that he was geographically undesirable.
He was a good.
A good old Gud. What else did you think about him? What was your opinion of him? Did you see a future for him at WCW?
He didn't make a big impression on me, and that's not because he wasn't extremely talented or didn't have a lot of potential. But again, this is something I try to communicate, on the podcast, and I guess it doesn't really resonate, or maybe I don't do a very good job trying to communicate it. But my role in WCW, particularly when Triple H or Paul Levesque came in, he wasn't Triple H back then. He was Hunter Hearst Helmsley or something, something along those lines. But when Triple H came into WCW, I really relied on other people who had more experience than I did in evaluating talent and recruiting talent and booking talent. That wasn't my forte. My forte was the business side of the wrestling business. And I left the creative side and the talent resource side or talent management side to people who had more experience than I did. So as a result of kind of taking myself out of that part of the equation, I didn't spend a lot of time, trying to evaluate or have an opinion or any input into a lot of those decisions. I think I said in the podcast, Paul Levesque came to us, I believe, through Terry Taylor. I'm not sure how they made the connection, but I'm pretty sure it was Terry Taylor that introduced, Paul to WCW. I helped negotiate his deal and may have had a conversation or two with him. But once that part of it was done, I was kind of hands off. My only real impression of Paul was I was at a Christmas party, not a Halloween party. I was at a Christmas party at Diamond Dallas Page's house because, as you pointed out in the show, he only lived a couple of doors down from me. And Page was a really big, Christmas is like the highlight of his life. He Christmas, after
surprise.
Yeah, after New Year's, Page would start planning next year's Christmas party like January 2nd, right? Start decorating his house in July. I mean, he just loved Christmas. And Page had a Christmas party at his house, and obviously, my wife and I went because we were right down the street. And Paul was there. Now, this was when he was, very new to WCW. And the only I know exactly where we were sitting in the house, and I remember this moment like it was 5 minutes ago. Everybody, it was a Christmas party. It was a wrestler. So guess what everybody was doing? There were cocktails flowing, and it was a wrestler's Christmas party, as one could only expect that might be. But the one guy who was, he was not off to his side. He wasn't standoffish. He was very sociable and everything. But I noticed that Paul, he wasn't drinking. He was, he had a bottle of water, and he was having fun, and he was, participating. But I noticed out of everybody that was in that room or in that house, he was the one guy that was just kind of under control, not getting too loud, managing himself very well, very professionally, and he wasn't drinking. And that's the one thing I remember about him, is he was kind of a straight-laced kind of cat. Other than that, I really didn't have much of an impression of him.
Interesting.
Oh, this is another interesting one from Blast Thunder in the chat. Who had better dance moves, Alex Wright or Disco Inferno?
Oh, are you kidding me? Alex Wright. Chrissy, come on. You chime in on this, Chrissy. I mean, if you had to pick,
where do you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with my man Eric on this one.
See, I feel like Disco, they both had the one move, but I feel like Alex Wright did that one move a lot better than Disco did his one move.
That's because Alex Wright knew he was packing, and he made sure that everybody else knew he was too.
I love it. And we are going to work on that Blue Chew sponsorship for this show, too. While we do that, Eric, Brad Clem in the chat has a very juicy question. He said, what did you actually do in the WWE this time around? What was your role?
Boy, that's a great question. The role as it was originally defined to me was to oversee the process and oversee the SmackDown brand, not to necessarily be involved in creative other than to oversee the management of it, and to essentially oversee all of the other elements of the business that had anything to do with SmackDown. So it was a very broad description. Keep in mind, it was a new job. It wasn't a position that had previously existed in WWE. So I think, not that I'm sure a lot of thought went into it, but it was a very, I think the position kind of is most likely still evolving. And being defined, but it was a very broad definition of the role.
Okay, I think we put some dirt sheet rumors to rest with that. So thank you, Eric.
Well, while we're on
Brad.
the dirt sheet portion, Bronze Yum V in the chat, has Eric spoken to Tony Khan about anything interesting? It's a very open-ended question. I think the general question is, have you been in the same room with Tony Khan at all?
No, I think I almost was in the same room with Tony Khan last weekend in Baltimore at Tony Schiavone's birthday party, which was a part of StarCast. And unfortunately, I didn't know this till after the event, but I went there. I didn't announce it, and it was kind of a surprise. And I just showed up just to say hi to a few people, really. And evidently, I got there, and I was on one end of the room, talking to Medusa, and hanging out on one end of the room, and up towards the front stage where all the activities were going to be taking place. Conrad Thompson had a little table, and Tony Khan was seated at that table. And I was supposed to be sitting there, but I just didn't want to sit there. I wanted to and I didn't know that Tony Khan was supposed to be there. I hadn't heard that. Nobody told me that. I didn't see a little name tag or anything on the table. I just didn't feel like sitting that close to the stage for some reason.
So Conrad was trying to get the two of you together.
No, see, you're jumping to conclusions. Sure. Christy Meltzer, right here. So that's funny. That really is
funny.
So anyway, I got up, I left that table, I was sitting on the other side, and shortly after I got up and left, I guess, Tony Khan came in, he sat there, and he was going to be there for the Tony Schiavone roast, right? And I heard this secondhand. I didn't see it happen because I was across the room, but evidently when Mark Madden got up, and I don't know how many of you, or if you guys know Mark Madden, or how many of you listeners know Mark, but he could be a little rough. He can piss you off in a heartbeat, right? And I love Mark. I get along with Mark. I always have. I dig his sense of humor. I dig his directness. I think he's a good human. He's a good person. I just think, he's made his living pissing people off, right? Well, you take a guy like Mark Madden and you say, hey, Mark, we want you to MC a roast. Well, guess what that's going to sound like? So evidently, right at the very beginning of this thing, everybody's seated, and Mark Madden opens up, and he goes, hey, look, over there, Tony Khan, the money mark. How many executive vice presidents do you have in your company anyway? And evidently, Tony took exception to that and got up and left. So I could have, I guess, had an opportunity to meet Tony Khan, but Mark Madden fucked it up for me. And by me telling this story, I probably just fucked it up for myself, but whatever.
Somebody else would tell that story if you didn't. It's a room of people.
That's very true. In this episode of 83 Weeks as well, you guys talked about your relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Was this an instance of WCW needing New Japan or New Japan needing WCW more? And also as well, kind of a follow-up with, all these upstart promotions. Do you think it's necessary for them to kind of co-promote shows with AAA or New Japan? Like, is it necessary? If you were running AEW, would you be reaching out to New Japan or AAA to do shows together like you guys did when Worlds Collide or, Starrcade 95 as well?
You asked a couple different questions there, so I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit. In terms of it, was it more important to WCW or to New Japan? I think it was important to both of us. Keep in mind, again, as you hear me say all the time, context is king. Keep everything in context. Back at that time, nobody was co-promoting. Everybody was an island unto themselves. My goal from the very beginning was to make WCW more of an international brand as opposed to a domestic U.S. brand. So it was very important to me and to WCW, therefore, to have a partner that I could work with on a consistent basis that would give the audience here in the United States the impression that WCW was more than just a domestic U.S. brand. So it was very important to me, but it was almost equally as important for different reasons to New Japan. So I would say it's probably one of the reasons why it was a great marriage, because in a relationship like that, everybody has to win. Both partners have to feel like they're coming out of it with what they need and what benefits them. It may be different. The reasons may be different. The motivation may be different. But as long as everybody's happy at the end of the day, it usually works. So at that point in time, I think we needed each other, albeit for different reasons. Now, you look at what people are doing today, and not a week or two goes by and somebody doesn't announce in some fakakta press release that they have a working relationship with so and so. What the fuck does that ever mean? It doesn't really mean anything. It means that you're going to book somebody that's already working in another territory, and you're going to book them once or twice, and that's going to be the end of it. Go back and look at the New Japan relationship. We had a much more extensive, consistent, ongoing relationship, including, ultimately going to North Korea together. So, two different times, different environments. The business has changed, everything's changed. But I hear about all these working relationships, and I've never been able to determine what it really means.
Well, you mentioned North Korea there, and I was actually wondering, how do you compare your crazy experience there with WWE going to Saudi Arabia?
That's a really good question. Obviously, there's some parallel, I guess. Although the United States and Saudi Arabia have a diplomatic relationship. Saudi Arabia is an ally of the United States. From a military point of view, there are a lot of business transactions that take place between Saudi Arabia and the United States. Americans can go visit Saudi Arabia if they choose to. Right. Not the case with North Korea. There was no diplomat. In fact, technically, the United States and North Korea to this day are still at war. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States today is much more amicable and friendly by a mile and a half than the relationship with the United States and North Korea back in 1995 when I went there.
What about your motives for going to North Korea versus WWE saying that they go to Saudi Arabia to hopefully expose people to new things and to maybe push for something like women to go compete in the ring?
I'm sure that's a part of the reason that they go. I think the other part of the reason they go is purely economic and financial. When we went to North Korea, there was, relatively speaking, no revenue involved at all. We went there my decision to go there, it was twofold. I'm going to be honest with you. Part of it was selfish, because the idea of actually promoting a wrestling event or being part of a wrestling event in an isolated dictatorship where no Americans were even allowed to step foot into the country, to me was kind of a challenge and a cool thing, and I just wanted to do it, to say I did it. That part of it was selfish. The other part of it, again, kind of fell into my strategy of helping to brand WCW as a bigger, broader international brand, and that was a really big, kind of crazy way to do it. So, but there was no economic advantage to it. We didn't make a bunch of money, unlike WWE, who makes a ton of fucking money.
Well, that's still my favorite episode of 83 Weeks, so keep all that juice coming. Steve?
Last week we talked about AAA When Worlds Collide. That was based in 94, and you felt it was helpful for WCW to partner with other wrestling promotions like AAA and New Japan for mutual success, because rising tides will rise all ships. Do you think that landscape is similar now in 2019, or does everyone kind of have to hoard their own bit and not collaborate?
I'm kind of going back to the discussion that we had a little while ago. What does it mean in today's environment when you see somebody have a working relationship, for example, with another company? What does that do? What does it accomplish? How is it promoted? How does everybody benefit? I never, and maybe it's because I'm not paying close enough attention. Maybe it is obvious how it benefits, but I for the most part, today it's just nothing more than a press release.
That's interesting. Talking about When Worlds Collide, we had When Worlds Collide, 94. In 95, there was Collision in Korea. In 96, WCW sent a couple wrestlers to this event called the World Wrestling Peace Festival in Los Angeles, California. It was guys from WCW, ECW, Japan, Mexico. A couple questions regarding that. One is, did you hear any rumblings backstage on why WWF didn't send any talent? And two, do you have any idea why this event wasn't televised the same way the other two were?
I'm not sure why it wasn't televised. I wasn't really promoting the event. It had nothing to do with the business side of it. Again, this was just my effort to kind of open up the doors to WCW a little bit and expose our product to a different audience. And again, give the impression that we were a bigger brand. In terms of why WWF didn't do it, I say WWF because that's what they were at the time. Just a different strategy. WWF has always been and still is, and obviously it's a very smart strategy on their part, very protective of their brand. This is not meant to sound like a shot, but they don't play well with others. They like to kind of keep everything in house, and again, tactically, strategically, that's a very good move for them. It's obviously paid off very, very well. I was taking a different approach. I was trying to get more attention. I was trying to expose our product to different people. I was trying to explore different markets and different opportunities because WCW was flat on its back and had nowhere to go but up.
And also, too, coming off that event, just weeks later or even months later, we saw WCW bring in guys like Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, a couple more guys. Were you kind of there also as scouting talent as well?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That was another big part of it.
Well, you got to tell us about your upcoming trip to the Middle East.
Well, funny you should mention that. Steve and I were going back and forth because there was a press release suggesting that I was supposed to. And by the way,
I saw that.
And social media, I've been pronouncing the country of Qatar as Qatar, like guitar, kind of like.
Yeah, that's how they say it on 90 Day Fiance, Qatar.
Yeah, well, evidently I'm wrong. I've been corrected, and the correct pronunciation of the country is Qatar. And the city that I'm going to is Doha. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I'm sure somebody in the Twitter universe will correct me if I'm not. But interestingly enough, the press release came out suggesting that I was going to be there tonight on the 14th. That is not the case. But I am supposed to be there on the 23rd of this month for a press conference. And then I'm going to be at their big event on February 20th of 2020.
So what's your role there? Are you just there for a little publicity bump, or are you going to be involved behind the scenes?
I'm making an appearance. And again, this is a country I've never been to the Middle East. I've been to a lot of other places. I've never been to the Middle East, and the promoter there is one that a lot of people that I know have worked with him. Sting and Booker T and a lot of other guys have worked there and have nothing but great things to say about the event and the promotion and everything that goes along with it. So I just thought, what the hell? It sounds like a great time. Never been there before. The Lebanese food I've read on, the internet is fantastic. So I'm going.
All right. Sounds delicious.
RKO 1988 in the chat, in all caps. What does Eric think about CM Punk? CM Punk appeared on Fox Sports 1 WWE Backstage last night. Do you have any thoughts on it? Any insight on it, perhaps?
Zero insight. I've never met CM Punk. I was at an autograph signing, I think, last spring. Where we were next to each other, but his line was like 1.5 miles long, and I had 20 people, waiting for my autograph, and we never really got a chance to chat. But I've never met him. I've never talked to him. I know nothing about him. I mean, well, I know a lot about him, all right, what I've read and heard and watched, but I've never met him, so I have no opinion about him, good, bad, or different. I'm very anxious, I hope, someday to meet him and get to know him. But I'm happy for him. Look, he landed a great gig. He's a controversial individual. He stood up for himself. He stood his ground. He put a lot at risk. He had the balls to, chase a dream, to fight in the UFC. And that, I admire the hell out of him for that. That's a hell of a thing to do. If you've not grown up as a wrestler or a kickboxer or a jiu-jitsu artist or a martial artist of any kind, and just to wake up one day in your 30s and go, hey, I think I want to try that, takes a takes a lot of courage, and I respect him for that. But I know nothing about him, and I'm happy for him. And by the reaction that I've seen in social media, I think it's a great thing for Fox, probably indirectly a great thing for WWE, and I'm sure it's a great thing for CM Punk. So I'm happy for everybody all the way around. It's a triple win.
There was recent news came about your good friend Sonny Onoo, who was hospitalized. I want to know, how is he doing? Have you seen him recently? Like, I know there was a lot of news going on. I heard he's getting better or doing better now.
He's a freak. It's funny. I knew he was in Japan because he was sending me pictures of all the Japanese restaurants, because that's what we do. We tease each other. Like if I'm out at a sushi bar and I've got some really great fish, I'll take a picture and I text it to him, because he lives in Mason City, Iowa. I mean, not a lot of great sushi.
Oh yeah, you can't get fresh fish there.
No. So just to kind of like make him, jealous, my wife and I will be out. We'll take a picture of the sushi and I'll text it to him, and then he does the same to me when he goes over to Japan. So I knew he had been to Japan for about 10 days, I think, with a promotion he was involved with, and he texted me right before he left Japan and he asked me a question. I didn't see the text till a day or two later. It just kind of slipped through my fingers, so to speak. And I saw it and I went, oh, I'm going to reach back out to Sonny. And I text Sonny and I said, hey, are you still in Tokyo? And he said, no, I'm in a hospital. I had a heart attack. Oh. I went, what the hell? So I called him right away, and he was in Minneapolis by that time. And what happened, hopefully Sonny won't get upset at me for sharing this, but while Sonny was in Japan, he wasn't really feeling well when he was at the airport. He boarded the plane, was very uncomfortable on the plane, got to Los Angeles to make his connection, was even more uncomfortable, just felt pressure in his chest, and just knew something wasn't right, but he thought, what the hell, I'll get to Minneapolis and whatever. Chewed a handful of aspirin just in case. Got to Minneapolis and realized, you know what, I really need to get this checked out. Went to the hospital and they said, dude, you're having a heart attack.
Oh my God.
And ended up having, a procedure done, and he's going back in to have a double bypass surgery, I think, in a couple weeks. And he's in great spirits. He was in Baltimore last weekend. In fact, Wednesday night he called me and he goes, hey, I'm coming out to see you. I'm thinking, dude, you just had a heart attack. What do you mean you're coming out to see me? And where are you coming to see me? Are you coming to Connecticut? Or what the heck? What do you mean you're coming to see me? He goes, no, I'm going to be in Baltimore with Muda, because he brought Muda over for StarCast. Oh. I thought, that's insane. But, he flew in. We got together Thursday night. Sonny and Muda's wife and myself all went out and had sushi and had a great time. And Sonny was in great spirits, and he's doing great.
Good. Oh, well, we are happy to hear that, and glad you got to spend a little time with your BFF.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the best part about Sonny and I hanging out together is whenever we do, there's always like massive quantities of great sushi involved. So it was a blast.
For a second there, I was not sure what you were going to say.
Yeah, and it was great to see Muda too. I haven't seen Muda. Really, I haven't had a chance to talk to Muda in probably about 20 years. I saw him back in January. I was in Tokyo for a couple of days, and we saw each other briefly, but we didn't get a chance to talk. So it was great to go out and have dinner with him and his wife.
Cool. Well, it's good to hear that you've been having so much fun lately and enjoying your time. And we wish you safe travels next week when you're going, all the way over to the other side of the world to Qatar or Qatar. However you decide that they pronounce it over there. But thank you so much for hanging out with us and all these people in the chat roll. They are singing your praises. Eric Bischoff is #1, Matthew Hammer says, and we loved sitting and getting to pick your brain. So thank you so much for tuning in with us, Eric.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
That was fun, you guys. All right, that was us giving you a little extra Eric for making up for his being absent last week. And you just heard it from the man himself. He will be right back here again next week. So make sure you join us live and get your questions answered. We do this on the 83 Weeks channel every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And we sure hope that you do join us. If you can't, we're always available on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts as well. Make sure you subscribe to the 83 Weeks channel, because you get all the clips from this show anyway. We don't want you to miss anything. And if they want to hit you up, Mr. Tardy Man over there, where would they do that at, George Hermoza?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, GHERMOZA. I'm here all week. I'd helped out covering Monday Night Raw this week, so I did both English and Spanish. Anybody wants to tune in? A lot to talk about this week on Raw. But yeah, thank you for having me.
And I'm Steve Kaufmann. You can find me on Twitter almost exclusively at Steve Kaufmann. That is KAUFMANN. I am heavily involved in the wrestling YouTube space, so if I'm tweeting a link, chances are I'm involved.
And thank you all for the live chat love. You can always hit me up at Christy Reports. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Christy Reports. And next week we will be covering...
World War III.
Thank you.
1995.
And
That's
then
right.
There's 2 World War IIIs back-to-back in the next 2 weeks.
And we and Eric Bischoff will be here for it. Send in your questions using hashtag after 83 weeks, and we'll see you then. Have a good one.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.